from the Oslo and Paris Commission. Chris is data manager there, where he is responsible for the oversight and coordination of the data flowing into the OSPAR system from contracting parties. I'll hand over to Chris. Thank you. And yeah, be careful with the slide advance.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I'm a bit nervous about using this pointer now after the excitement. Right. Teach me.
Tell me next slide. It doesn't seem to work. Just tell me next slide.
Okay, give me the sign.
Okay.
Thank you. On a bit. Made to measure. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, everybody can hear. Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'm Chris Moulton. As mentioned, I'm responsible for data and information at the OSPAR Commission Secretariat. I'm going to give a quick run through of who and what OSPAR is, the flow that leads to assessments and the data that underpin them, how these are published, and then the work that we're doing to basically unlock these data so that they can be used by the wider community. So for those of you that don't know, OSPAR is the merging, if you will, of two conventions, the OSPAR Convention and the Paris Convention, signed in 72 and 74 respectively, and then come together for the Convention for the Protection of the Marine Environment of the Northeast Atlantic. So this is the OSPAR Maritime Area. It's 13.5 million square kilometers-ish, covering the Arctic, the wider Atlantic, Bay of Biscay, Iberian coast, Celtic Seas, and Greater North Sea. We have our neighbours to the right in the Baltic. We have the HELCOM, and we have 100% overlap in Region 1 with the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Programme. So we work closely with our neighbours as well due to the overlapping nature of our work. And again, it was part of being consistent. So OSPAR's vision is of a clean, healthy, and biologically diverse Northeast Atlantic Ocean, which is productive, used sustainably, and resilient to climate change and ocean acidification. Not that I've said that before. And this is implemented, the vision, through a series of tasks and strategic objectives and operational objectives, which will make sense in a moment on the next slide. So starting at the top is the strategic and obviously the convention text at the very top, with the Northeast Atlantic Environment Strategy, which is a 10-year strategy, which is basically the agreed way that the 16 contracting parties to OSPAR are going to implement the agreed parts of the convention text. So that will change every 10 years. And then underneath that, we gradually get more technical, luckily, as we come down to this left-hand side. And so we have what's called the JAMP, which is the Joint Assessment and Monitoring Program. So this is describing the deliverables, if you will, under the strategy. So there's a series of agreed products that are committed to be delivered by the contracting parties. And then as we come further down, we have the CEMP, which is the Coordinated Environmental Monitoring Program. Again, we're getting more technical as we come down. So this is how these data are going to be collected across the whole area in a consistent fashion, so that we can deliver the assessments and the deliverables underneath the JAMP. And then following underneath the CEMP is where we get increasingly expert involvement, and they have the detailed documentation of the agreed monitoring and assessment methods. You'll need to stay still as well. Sorry, I'm a bit of a wriggler. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, so we have these CEMP guidelines. So these are very detailed documentation of agreed monitoring methods, and also the assessment methods, and it will define the data requirements to deliver those assessments. And then following from that, we have the reporting formats and reporting guidance. And this is the real technical documentation of how data are going to be delivered. So the idea of what I'm trying to show here is that there's a strong underpinning all the way down from the convention text through agreed deliverables and assessments and the data that they need in order to deliver those. And then, sorry, there is an alternate path there because we have some data streams that don't actually strictly follow that, but we do still have some documentation. So it's not perfection by any means, but there's a strong underlying structure to how that's going to happen. And then on the right-hand side, we have ways of measuring, if you will, whether or not the agreed deliverables are on track and how that's how the delivery is going, basically, to keep things in check and make sure that things are adapted as needed based on the realities of the world, if you will. So I appreciate this is a long one, but again, thinking about the previous slide at the top there, we had the strategy, and this is the text within that strategy. So to give the idea that the underpinning data to these assessments are of utmost importance, basically. So this is within the strategy text that in order to deliver these as robust and dependable assessments, we need the data to do that. And then the data are delivered using something called the OSPAR Data and Information Management System, a slightly faded picture on the top right there. So this is ODIMS, and then on the right, bottom right, sorry, is the OPE, which is the OSPAR Assessment Portal, where the assessments are delivered. And these two portals are obviously directly linked. And then at the bottom there is the commitment that the data that are being delivered are fair, they're findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And there's the addition of the word reproducible because of the nature of the assessments. We want to be able to track changes over time. So thinking of assessments and purely within biodiversity here, we have 101 assessments within OSPAR for biodiversity at different stages of development. And each assessment has underpinning data requirements. So on the left-hand side is that alternate path that I mentioned. So we have status assessments for the OSPAR list of species and habitats, and we have regular committee assessments on the top left. So that might include something like a status assessment of marine protected areas. And on the right-hand side is the quality status report or intermediate assessment. So these are 6-year assessments that OSPAR carries out, and we have different levels here. So at the top are common indicators. So these ones are the sort of the strongest and agreed assessments for very specific OSPAR regions. And then we have candidate indicators, which are the ones that are under development and not quite ready to be agreed as common. And then we have pilot assessments. So this is a trial of a candidate, sort of a proof of concept, if you will. And at the very bottom, we have integrated assessments, which is an area of development at the moment and directly links to the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So that is taking a number of different common indicators with an overlapping data, basically an information and message, and brings it together and literally integrates the outputs to give an oversight or a more overarching statement of a topic or thing. As I mentioned, there's plenty of documentation that underpins, and this is just to illustrate for habitats data stream, the amount of documentation that might sit underneath that data set. We're only dealing with biodiversity here, but it's just a note there are intersections with other OSPAR thematic areas, including contaminants with, there's an assessment with contaminants marine mammals, there's aggregate extraction with pelagic habitats and marine litter with just about everything. This is the agreed publication flow for a few of those data streams. So there's the underlying documentation, the data is delivered, but before publication, it's still based on the different streams. We'll go through these different approval processes, and there'll be publication again via the agreed methods. This is a blatant advertisement for ODIMS and where you can go and have a look at the data. This is the intention, after all, that these data are opened up for everybody to go and use as they see fit. And we have OPE as well in the same measure. But anybody to go and have a look at. And as I referred to earlier, there's a quality status report that OSPAR published in 2023. And again, there is a direct linkage. If you find the assessments, you can find the data that underpin those assessments. And there is a linkage with the European Commission, the European Environment Agency for the Marine Strategy Framework obligation for contracting parties. There's a pre-filling exercise that goes there. So technically, ODIMS has OGC compliant web services because we have incoming data streams from thematic data centers and we have outgoing so that other users can access and use the data. The data are licensed according to CC0, so there's no obligation for attribution, but there's still an attribution that's given because I think if anybody's using the data, especially scientific, you need to refer back to your sources. And then looking forward, OSPAR applied and received Associate Data Unit status under IODE in October of 2024. And then the first steps were last week when some of the regional seas conventions got together with Dan and the Marco Polo project and thinking about how we can start to unlock these data through the metadata. And as I say, open everything up. So this is really, like I said, last week. So we are right at the beginning of this journey to open up the archive for access for the wider community. And yeah, just to finish, OSPAR really sees this ADU membership, if you will, this role as an opportunity to support the wider community with the data that OSPAR has. And as I showed, we've got a strong background structure to these data and how they're collected, and we want to maximize the return on investment, especially in a critical area like biodiversity when monitoring and data gaps can be so prevalent, facilitating data reuse and collaborating and sharing experiences. And as was mentioned earlier, this is all accessible data to be used within the BBNJ agreement, and however that might manifest moving forward and achieving these global targets of protecting the marine environment. Thank you.